I know it might sound crazy, but the story I'm about to tell you has affected my life completely. I live in a constant state of paranoia, skeptical of every person I encounter. It's also messed up my mental health to the point where I see things, and I'm always looking over my shoulder. I've had to change my identity to avoid certain people, and the situation haunts me to this day. Here's the chilling story of what happened to me when I was young. It was a warmer April in 1999. I was 15 at the time, and my parents decided that they wanted to take a hiking trip for the week. They asked if I would stay with my aunt and uncle, who lived on the other side of town. I thought it was strange that my aunt and uncle offered for me to stay with them, because we haven't seen them in almost 10 years, but I politely accepted. I figured it was starting to get nice out and thought my parents could use a break from everyday life. My parents mentioned that my aunt and uncle were a little weird. They were a recluse religious type that didn't really associate with anyone around them. They didn't have kids and pretty much kept to themselves for the most part. I really don't remember spending time with them growing up, so I figured it'd be a good thing to try and get to know them better. It was Sunday afternoon and my parents were getting packed up for their trip. I had just finished packing up my clothes and guitar so that I'd be ready to spend time with my relatives for the week. We sat down together for one last meal before they drove me over. We get to my aunt and uncle's house and approached the door. They opened it up with a big smile to greet us. I walked in with my bag and guitar case and took a look around. The walls were pretty bare except for a few pictures of the two of them. My aunt says, "You've grown up so much since I last saw you, Fiona. Look at that gorgeous smile. You've really turned into a beautiful young woman." My uncle then said, "Hey Fiona, been a long time and we're really happy to have you here with us." I let them know it was nice to see them too and that I was happy to get a chance to hang out with them for the week. I gave my parents one last hug before they left and told them I loved them. They said, "We love you too, and we'll see you at the end of the week." My uncle closed the door behind my parents, and the two of them started to talk to me. I mentioned to them that I had picked up a guitar and that I was also in a band with my friends Faye and Flynn, and that we'd practice every day after school in my parents' garage. My uncle joked about all of our names starting with the letter F. I laughed it off and said, "Yeah, we get that a lot." He then said that the second house they owned down the driveway was vacant, and if we wanted to, we could practice there for the week. It was set in the woods, so there wasn't any neighbors around, which made it nice and peaceful. I was surprised and thought it was really cool of them to offer us that spot. The both of them smiled and said, "It would be our pleasure." It was getting late, so we said our goodnights. I headed to the room where I was staying in and passed out for the night. The next day I made my way to the school, excited to tell my friends about the opportunity to continue our jam sessions despite my parents being out of town for a bit. They were all excited and couldn't wait to practice. We finished up school and made our way to the vacant house. The house seemed pretty run down and overgrown, but was under construction. It had a few doors, one in the front and one in the back. The one in the back was padlocked with a sign that read, "No trespassing, under construction." We walked through the front door, and it wasn't too late, so we weren't overstepping curfew. Perfect enough time for us to set up and get a practice session in. We finished up practice and I locked up the house. And as we proceeded outside, we see a black van with tinted windows parked on the side of the driveway. As soon as the van takes notice of our presence, they drive away quickly. We all looked at each other with confusion, wondering who that was and what they were doing there. But we shrugged it off and figured maybe they got lost and didn't want to raise suspicion of being there. I part ways with Flynn and Faye and make my way down the driveway. My aunt and uncle were there to open the door. They asked me how my day was and that dinner was ready to go. So we headed in and we sat down at the dinner table. My uncle says a prayer over the meal, and as he's finishing, my aunt opens her eyes to then just stare at me for a solid minute or so. I attempted to break the stare spell by asking them how their day was. My aunt looks at me and says, "You're gonna have to excuse me. We don't ever have company over, so we're overwhelmed to have someone at our table." She also said that I had a gorgeous smile, that I was very beautiful, and that my parents were lucky to have me. I thanked her and started to eat, and the food was delicious. Out of teenage curiosity, I asked them why they chose to never have children. My aunt becomes uneasy and shaken up. And while my uncle tries to comfort her, he looks at me and says, "We've never been able to have them. We've tried, but it's never been possible. We do believe that Daga will bring us a child soon." I showed a hopeful smile and apologized for coming off as rude. We finished up eating and I head upstairs where I then went to sleep for the night. The next day came and went and we finished up band practice. I make my way back to the house, and as I do, I hear a vehicle slowly pulling up behind me. I turned around to see the same black van that we saw the day prior and started to walk faster. I was able to make my way to the front door of the house where my aunt opens the door to let me in, anxiously trying to catch my breath. I tell her about the vehicle, and she mentions to me it was a business associate of my uncle who was stopping by for a visit. I relaxed for a second and caught a sigh of relief. My aunt had made dinner before I came home, so I ate by myself quietly at the table while my uncle went out to meet with this person. Minding my own business and finishing up, the van drives away and my uncle walks back inside. He looks at me and says, "Hello, Fiona," and then quietly walks back up to his room. Later that night, I decided to take a shower before I went to sleep. I close the door behind me and get into the shower. While I'm in there, I hear the bathroom door open slowly. I wipe the soap out of my eyes and look to the door to see my aunt staring at me. I asked her if she needed something, for I was almost done. She locks onto me with the widest smile and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Fiona. I couldn't help it. You're just so beautiful." I thanked her but politely asked for some privacy so I could finish up my shower. My aunt closes the door, and at this point I'm getting kind of creeped out by my aunt's strange infatuation with the way I look. I dry off, put my clothes on, and proceed to the bedroom. As I'm walking down the hallway, I hear my aunt and uncle praying in their room as I walk by. I head to bed for the night and fall asleep rather quickly. It's the middle of the night, and I wake up to the feeling of someone brushing my hair and gently touching my face. I'm a light sleeper, so generally any form of movement tends to wake me up. It was dark in my room, but my eyes were pretty well adjusted. The door to the bedroom was wide open, and I could see my aunt standing right over my bed and looking down at me. It caught me by surprise, and I asked her if everything was okay. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just checking up on you to make sure you were doing okay." I said, "Yes, I'm fine." She didn't say anything back and made her way out of the room, closing the door behind her. It really creeped me out, and I had a hard time sleeping for the rest of the night. The morning came, and I was getting ready for school. I head down the stairs to see my uncle sitting down reading the newspaper and asked him where my aunt was. He mentioned that she was out getting groceries. I said all right and made my way out the door. On my way to the school, I think back to last night, and was still uneasy by my aunt's stare. It's afternoon and I get to the lunch table with Flynn, realizing that Faye didn't show up to school. I asked Flynn where she was, but he mentioned he hasn't seen her and that she was probably sick or something. He asked me if I was doing okay since I seemed pretty spacey and out of it. I tell him that I'm fine, but I've been getting weird vibes from my aunt and was hoping that the week would go by faster so I could see my parents. And we also decided to have band practice to smooth things out, even with Faye being out of school. I thanked him for being awesome and we finished our lunch. I head to my biology class and sit down at my desk. Midway through the lecture, the loudspeaker comes on. "Fiona Hopkins, please report to the main office at this time." My teacher calls on me and excuses me from the classroom. My stomach is twisting in knots at the thought of what this might be about. I get up and make my way to the office, and as I enter the door, the principal says, "Hey, Miss Fiona, there's a phone call for you." I take the phone slowly from the principal's hand and say hello. Taken back by a comforting voice, I hear my father say, "Hey, Fiona." I was beyond relieved and felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. He mentioned to me that the weather has been getting bad, so he decided to cut the trip short and that they were on their way back. I've never been more excited to hear that in my life. I talked to him for a little bit and mentioned the strangeness of my aunt. He said she's always been weird and not to worry because they'd be home later in the day. I tell him I love him and that I'd see them soon. I hang up the phone and start to make my way out of the office back to the classroom. As I exit the office, I look to the left where the main door of the school building was. I see a man standing there, dressed in dark clothes, glaring at me through the window. I take a good look at him for a bit, but couldn't make out who he was due to his attire, and the man was wearing sunglasses. He lifts his hand up slowly and gives me a slow wave. I panic a bit and head to the office to tell the security guard that a strange man was at the door. The guard comes out quickly, but the man was nowhere to be found. The guard says, "Are you sure there was a man there?" I told him I swear he was right there, dressed in dark clothes, and he was just staring at me. He said he'd keep an eye on it and to get back to class, so I made my way back to the classroom to sit down, relieved to have talked to my dad, but also feeling uneasy from the man standing in the window. The school day ends and Flynn and I head to the house for band practice. I told him that things would be back to normal, and that my parents were making their way back home. He was really happy for me and excited to get back to the garage to start practicing again. We make our way up to the house and I go to unlock the door. I realized I forgot the keys. I must have been too anxious in the morning to have remembered to bring them. I told Flynn to chill at the house for a second, and I head down to my aunt and uncle's to grab the keys. I get to the front door and open it up, calling out to my aunt and uncle to see if anyone was home, but no one answered. I walk up the stairs and grab the keys out of the bedroom, and as I come back down the stairs I see a small note on the table that read, "Out for necessities, we'll be back soon." I put the note back on the table and walked out the front door. As I'm heading up the driveway towards the house, I see a black van pulled up next to the back door that's normally padlocked. A man resembling the person I saw at the school earlier walks out of the door. Luckily, I was able to hide behind a tree and some brush, so he wouldn't have been able to see me. He looked pretty sketchy as he padlocked the door and looked around to see if anyone was watching him. He then got back in his van and drove down towards my aunt and uncle's house. I made sure he was gone and headed down the driveway to meet up with Flynn. He was hanging out on the front porch waiting for me, and as I'm unlocking the door, I asked him what was going on with that man. Flynn mentioned that the guy claimed to be a construction worker and was grabbing a tool that he had forgotten down in the basement. Getting nervous, I mentioned to him that the guy in the van looked a lot like the guy that was standing in the doorway at the school earlier today. I told him not to worry about it and we started to practice. I looked out the window to see my aunt's car driving down the driveway. Finishing up the song, I come up with a plan and tell Flynn about how I was going to break the padlock to see what was behind the door. We finished up practice and made our way to the back door. Flynn asked me if I was sure I wanted to do this, and I told him that things had been getting weird lately, and I wanted to know what was going on down there. Without hesitation, I started to kick in the door. The door was pretty old and beat up, so it wouldn't take much of a beating to break it in. I finally managed to break the door open. Looking in there was a staircase leading down to the basement, so we slowly walked down the steps. As we get to the bottom of the stairs, I find a light switch to turn on the lights. There was a narrow hallway that led to a door, so we walked up towards it and opened it up. The room was small in size. To the right was a desk. The contents on top of it had ritualistic properties. Candles forming into a circle with this tied up bag in the center of it. On the desk was a pair of pliers that had bloodstains running down the handles. To the left of the desk was a bag of tools, opened up with a sledgehammer handle sticking out of it. Behind the desk on the wall, I see these drawings of strange figures cloaked in dark robes, holding up torches in a circle. There was also a larger portrait that appeared to be drawn in blood. The image resembled a dreamlike being that you would see in a nightmare. There was writing at the bottom that read, "O Dega the Wondrous, we bring this vessel to you. In exchange, we hope that we may be blessed with kin of our own. We praise you this day and hope you accept our humble offering. Blessed be Lord Dega, forever our souls be in your hands." I also noticed multiple Polaroid pictures smeared in blood. There was another Polaroid on the desk. The person in the picture was me. I panicked and Flynn did his best to calm me down. I walked towards the desk and picked up the sack to open it up. And when I looked inside, I see a pile of pulled teeth. Some of the teeth had dried up blood on them, and some were scraped clean. I dropped the bag on the ground, spilling teeth everywhere. Flynn looked terrified and nervous as well, but he stayed strong through it all. I look on the table to see a journal, and I flip through the pages disturbed by what I was reading. The latest entry read, "O Dega, what have I done? This girl, for she wasn't the one. I'm such a fool for bringing her here. With countless times she's been right there." As I look at this body battered and bruised, teeth torn out, her mouth contused. This imposter breathes no longer. I must go out and find the daughter. Fiona will be here shortly, I must prepare. Praise be to Dega, your vessel will be here soon. I start to tear up and look around to see a freezer adjacent to the desk. Flynn asked me if I was sure about opening it up. Without answering him back, I lift the freezer lid up to see Faye's lifeless body disfigured and stuffed inside. I immediately slammed the freezer door shut and started to gag. I'm crying uncontrollably at this point, with Flynn picking me up and saying we need to get out of here now. We close the door behind us and make our way back up. I stumble over to the grass and start to vomit. It's getting late at this point, and I decided to avoid going back to my aunt and uncle's house. Flynn offers to stay with me, and we take a walk up the road. I see headlights approaching us, and I recognize the vehicle. It was my parents. I panic, run up, and start smacking on the window. My parents could tell I was distressed and that something bad was up. Flynn and I told him the whole story, and my parents rushed to the police station. The police drove to the location and found the scene. They also managed to arrest my uncle, my aunt, and the strange man. When questioned about the situation, police were able to find out that my aunt and uncle were in charge of a cult within the town. The mysterious man who was the business associate of my uncle was actually a part of the cult and worked directly under him. My aunt told the police during the interrogation, "My niece is beautiful, and I would have loved to hold her smile in my hands. All I wanted was for my prayer to be fulfilled. I wanted Daga to provide us with a child, and Fiona was the perfect vessel." It's been 10 years since that incident, and I've moved on from that town, leaving the past behind with it. The story still haunts me and gives me chills just thinking about it. All three of them were locked up and never to be heard from again. I've had to change my identity in hopes that no one from the Daga cult would find me or my family. I miss Faye and Flynn, and wish it never came down to that horrible night. I hope Faye's family was able to find peace after all these years. I'm not sure what the journal meant by vessel. I'm just grateful that I took the risk of breaking that door down. For who knows what could have happened if I stuck around any longer. Thank you everyone for being here and for checking this video out. If you enjoy this content, leave a like and subscribe to know when new videos release in the near future. Hope you're all well and staying safe. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.